Welcome to Jason Live. I'm Haley Nelson, and we are back with our STEM career series, where we learn about careers in science, technology, engineering, and math from role models in those fields. And today's role model is Dr. Roland Kays. Roland, he is a wildlife biologist at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and NC State University, where he helps conserve wildlife, train students in science, and engages the public in conservation. He splits his time among teaching, research, and fieldwork. He travels all over the world to do things like research baboons in Kenya and even finding new mammal species. Now, we're going to learn all about our STEM role model and more when we connect with Roland in just a moment. But first, I want to remind you all that today's event is live and interactive. So if you're joining us from the Jason Learning website, you can find a little box right below this video window where you feel free to ask any questions that you'd like, or you can send us a tweet at #JasonLive. All right, now it's time to say hello to Roland. Hi.
Hey, how's it going, Haley?
It's going well. It's going well. We've got lots of questions in the queue for you today.
Excellent.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Sure.
Can you tell us what a wildlife biologist is?
Well, it's a person who studies wildlife is the basic idea. And there's all sorts of different research questions we can ask, all sorts of things that we don't know about animals that if we can understand them better, we can get to know them better and hopefully also help to conserve them, help to, make sure that they don't go extinct or that their populations don't suffer.
Well, those all sound like pretty good things to happen. There are many different ways scientists collect data during investigations. So New Richmond Elementary asks, Can you tell us about some of the methods that you use to collect data?
Sure. So a lot of what I like to do is a lot of the questions and a lot of the way that I collect data is about where animals go. And of course, that's like the thing about animals, right? Compared to plants is animals can move around. And so that also makes them harder to study because you can go out to a tree and put a tag in that tree and you can go back next year and the tree's still there in the same place. And you can measure how it's grown from that. But an animal, you put a tag on a squirrel and you go back the next day, the squirrel's gone. And so we need ways that we can study these animals while they're moving around. And so we do that. I do that in two main ways. One is we put GPS tracker tags on animals and let them go. And then the GPS will record where those animals have been. And we can understand, how they use the planet, how they use the environment, how they respond to people, all sorts of different questions we can ask by seeing where one individual animal moves over time. The other way that we do that is kind of the flip of that, where we take a camera trap and we put a camera, strap it to a tree, and then it records all the animals that go by one place. And so that way we get to know all the animals, even if we didn't catch them and put a tag on them, we still get to know that they're using a certain area. So those are the two methods that I use the most to study how animals move around the planet and how we can sort of help them by preserving their habitat and maybe trying to have less of an impact on them as people.
Wow, so you use a lot of different kinds of technology. This is really neat. Sounds super cutting edge.
Well, we try to stay the cutting edge, but sometimes the electronics are your downfall too, because getting these high-tech electronics and then putting them out on a tree and having it rain and thunder and giant storms and having ants crawl in, and sometimes these cameras just get totally destroyed. Actually, the worst are bears and elephants. They destroy our cameras sometimes. The bears, they like to turn around and scratch their back on the camera. So all of a sudden you'll just see all this black hair, and then sometimes they'll bite it, and the elephants will go and sometimes they'll just knock the whole tree down. So sometimes that's hard. And then when we put the collars on the animals, sometimes they'll destroy those too. So electronics, it's necessary sometimes. There's no other way to get some of this data, but sometimes they fail, and then you're stuck.
Common problems with elephants and hair scratching. We have a question from Emily Hessman and a related one from Swag Animals 101. They ask, what animals do you study, and what animal are you mainly focusing on?
Well, I don't think I mainly focus on any particular animal. I study, mostly I study mammals, but that's a whole bunch of different, that's like 5,000 different species, right? And sometimes I do some work on birds as well. I've even done a little bit of work on bees once. That was kind of fun. So mostly I do mammals. And a lot of the species that I've studied are carnivores, or in the carnivore group. So that includes like bears and wolves and cougars, stuff like that. But then also things like raccoons are in that family. And I did my PhD on an animal called the kinkajou. And it's a raccoon relative. And basically, almost nobody else has ever studied it. And so I'm kind of by default the world's expert on kinkajous, which is kind of a fun. That's my license plate actually on my car, is kinkajou. That's how you know I'm the kinkajou expert. If you see a North Carolina kinkajou license plate, you can honk your horn. That's me.
Yeah, and that's it's also a Pokemon, the kinkajou, right?
Pikachu. Funny, because that actually came out while I was doing my PhD when I was in grad school, and everyone was joking that I was getting my PhD in Pikachu.
Well, we have a question from Sport High. What happens when you find a new species of animal? What do you do? How do you name it? Oh, and Melania Ackers, she knows a little bit about this. She said, how long did it take you to discover Olingitos?
Yeah. So I'll give this example with the Olingito. And so when you find a new species of animal, the first thing you have to know is that it's new, right? That no one else has already described it. And then the process is you formally describe it to the world. You say, here's this new animal. Here's how it's different than the other animals, from taking measurements or by what it looks like, what its teeth are like. And then you can use genetics to also say, this is how it's different, and these are the other animals that it's related to. So that's sort of how you describe it. And then you get to pick the name as well. You get to pick the formal Latin name, right? Every animal is given a genus and a species. And so in this case, the Olingito, we already knew it was in the raccoon family. So that was family Procyon. And it was closely related to the Olingos. And so we put it in that genus, and that already had a name, and that was called Bassaricyon. But then the last one, the species name, that's what we got, and we got to give it the common name as well. And so the species name we gave Neblina, which means clouds, because we found this animal in the cloud forest of Ecuador and Colombia. And then the common name we gave Olingito, because ito in Spanish means small. And so Olingito means small olingo, and it is the smallest member actually of the raccoon family. And so that's kind of how we came about those names. It took us a while. We actually found it, initially we actually found it in museums. In a museum drawer, no one realized that it was a new species. And we were looking through, my colleague Chris Helgen was looking through museum drawers, and he said, here's this red olingo. And he's like, he's like, he looked back at all the other lingos that we knew, and none of them were red. And so he said, I think this thing is really different. But then we went and did field work to confirm that they were really still there, and get some genetic samples so we could do the whole thing. And it took us, it should have been done in about a year, but it kind of stretched out over a longer period of time.
Well, it's so exciting.
It was fun.
I mean, jumping up and down, you think there are no more mammals that you could discover, and yet.
Well, no, there really are. And it's not just, I mean, this was pretty exceptional because it was kind of a big, cute, furry one. And, but you know, it was up in the trees. It mostly only came out at night. And if you go to the cloud forest at night and you put on your headlight and you look up, a lot of times all you see is clouds. So that blocks the light, right? So it's hard to find this animal. But now that we know where it is, there's actually some places you can go. There's some birder lodges that put out hummingbird feeders, and the Olingito will come and feed from the hummingbird feeders. And we actually found one of these places. They sent us pictures, and they're like, hey, is this an Olingito? And we said, yeah, it is. And I actually took my kids down, and we got to hang out and see the Olingito come down and feed from these hummingbird feeders. So that's pretty cool.
And adorable. So we have Rahel from McNair Elementary and Rohan. They've got two related questions. What is one of the most interesting animals you've studied, and why? And why did you choose specific animals to study?
Good question. Yeah, well, I'll tell you the one that I really am still fascinated with and would like to do some more work with, but I'm not at the moment, is the fisher. And the fisher is, it's in the weasel family, and it's big. It's a big weasel, right? It's like bigger than your cat, especially the males are a little bit bigger. So sometimes I say, well, it's like a big weasel, or you could look at it like a small wolverine. And the amazing thing about these animals is they were doing really poorly like 100 years ago. They had been driven out of most of the range by fur trappers. And they only survived in a couple places. But then in around 1930, we realized, hey, this animal is doing really bad. We need to protect it. So we protected it. And it took a long time, but their population started coming back. But even then, we thought it was a wilderness species. These fishers are these wilderness predators. You're only going to find them out in the really, really wild areas. Well, what we found in the Northeast, like in Albany, New York, and Boston, and some other places in Rhode Island, these fishers were actually moving into cities. And not like running down the street, but they were running through people's backyards. They were going in the woods in little suburban neighborhoods, and they were eating squirrels like crazy. All these gray squirrels that are so common in people's backyards, and they never really had a predator that was that could run around the ground and climb trees. And so I actually talked to this guy who saw this squirrel sitting in a tree eating a pear, and the fisher, it was in his backyard, and the fisher comes running up on the ground. And the squirrel just looked at it like, oh, that's a dog. It can't climb the tree. And it kept eating the pear. And the fisher went right up the tree and grabbed the squirrel and running away. So there's some really interesting stuff. And we did get to study them. We got to track them moving around. We got to see that they're really smart. They'll often go under the road through like a drainage culvert instead of going over the top where they might get hit by a car.
Smarties.
So that's a species that I'm really fascinated. The other thing, here's something that I haven't done yet. No one has ever done this. Fishers are known to be the only one of the only predators of porcupines. And
okay.
Pretty remarkable because porcupines are like the same size or a little bit bigger than a fisher, and they've got these giant quills, right? So the fisher, no one has ever seen this or filmed it. This is what I would love to see. So people will see the remnants, right? They'll see, and we've seen in the snow, you'll see the area where the fisher had tracked them, and it seems like the fisher runs circles around it and then goes in and bites the face and then runs back and can. We actually found a skull of a porcupine that had been crushed by the fisher.
Whoa!
And no one's ever seen that in the wild, and no one's ever filmed it. And so that would be so cool. I haven't done it.
Is that all up in the Northeast?
They are in Maryland and West Virginia. They're coming back all over the Northeast. They're also in the Great Lakes area and in the West, basically the kind of the northern forests.
Awesome. Camera traps. Okay, John Paul wants to know, what aspects of the animal do you look at when you study it?
Well, one of the things I like to look at, we talked earlier about the camera traps and the radio collaring, or the GPS collars, is where they go. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big question that I have, is how are they deciding where to go, and how is that affecting their survival? And are there things about the environment that we can improve or modify to help them survive better? And so by studying how they move from one place to the other, like with these fishers, right? We found that instead of going over the road, they'll go under the road on these culverts. So now we know that if we can put some more of these culverts and underpasses in good places, we can help the fishers get around in suburban areas without getting hit by cars. So that's kind of the main thing that I like to look at. But of course, sometimes we do measurements of skulls from museum specimens. Sometimes we do genetic tests. We're doing a project right now with house cats with isotopes. And isotopes are, everything is made of elements, and you can compare the isotopes of different elements to see basically what an animal's eating. Because you are what you eat, right? So whatever, if you eat a hamburger, the isotopes from that hamburger get into your body. And so what we're gonna test is if, just by looking at the isotopes of cat hair, we're gonna test if cats are eating cat food, or if they're also eating birds and mice and other animals outdoors. Because we'll be able to tell the differences in the isotopes. We'll be able to tell if they're eating just cat food or cat food and other things.
Oh, I love suburban science. That's too cool. Laura B wants to know, how long does it take to learn and observe a day in an animal's life? Like, what do you have to do to prepare for observing an animal in their habitat?
Yeah, so it's so like your squirrel or your birds in your backyard, you could do that right now, right? And so you could go out and you could get your binoculars and your pad of paper, and you could observe and just see what the animal's doing. So there are lots of things that you can do without technology and without expensive stuff. But if you want to use camera traps, that's another way that's actually really easy And we actually have citizen science projects where you can help scientists collect data on animals yourself. And sometimes you're recording things that you see in backyard at bird feeders. Other times we have one in North Carolina called Candid Critters, where you can borrow a camera trap, put the camera trap in your backyard or in your favorite state park or national park or wherever you want to put the camera trap, and get pictures of these animals and then send them to us, and we can use them for our research questions. So there's all kinds of ways that that kids who are interested in animals can help scientists. And so you're collecting real data that's really going to be useful, and at the same time, you get to learn a little bit about what it's like to be a scientist, and you get to see animals in different ways and sort of learn about that technique. So our project in North Carolina is called Candid Critters, where we're loaning out the camera traps, and there's other ones like that. There's another website called SciStarter that's great if you want to find citizen science projects that you can participate in. SciStarter has thousands of them, and you can sort of say, I like animals and I live in this state, and it'll help you find one that might be good for you.
Well, perfect. I'm sure that there are a lot of students out here who are watching who would love to be observing animals and finding ways to take pictures of them. We have a question from Gavin's Kids. It says, we have been studying hybrid animals, both naturally bred and crossbred by humans. Are hybrid animals a way for Mother Nature to help troubled species, or are hybrids hurtful to the development of species since many can't produce? What are your thoughts on hybrids?
Hybrids, wow, what a question. This is awesome. Yeah, so hybridization, right? You have species A and species B, and they breed together. So many times that just doesn't work. But sometimes, right, if you were to take a kangaroo and a chipmunk, like that's just not going to work, right? But if you take two animals that are very similar, like two chipmunks, maybe, two different similar chipmunks, or maybe, for example, coyotes and wolves are known to hybridize, then you can get a hybrid, and that animal can survive. Sometimes they can survive and mate and reproduce. And this has actually happened many times over the years, over the millions of years on Earth. And what it does, so the cool thing about hybridization is that it makes new variation, right? It makes this new thing. It's not like a coyote and it's not like a wolf. It's a little bit in between, or whatever combination you're looking at. And if evolution if that animal is well adapted to the present environment, that animal is going to survive better and pass those genes on. And so that's what happened actually with coyotes. The coyotes used to only live in the Western United States. Then they hybridized with wolves, and that hybridization, that adding of some wolf genes, allowed them to grow a little bit larger. And so now they're big coyotes. They're not giant coyotes, but they're bigger than the other coyotes. And those are the animals that spread east into the eastern United States. So that addition of variation from the wolf genes allowed them to get bigger, probably allowed them to hunt deer better, and allowed them to spread east much faster than if they didn't have those genes.
Wow, I've actually gotten to see a couple of those large coyotes right here in North Carolina.
Oh yeah, so all the coyotes in the east have some wolf genes, and they also have some dog genes. They also hybridize with dogs at some point. So they're mostly coyote. They're like 80 or 90% coyote, and then 5 or 10% wolf and 5 or 10% dog. And it's all mixed up. They're all have a little bit of that in them. So sometimes you'll see a black coyote, and that's a dog gene. The black coat color comes from dogs. Sometimes you'll see a reddish coyote, or I've seen some that look like German shepherds. And that's one of those dog genes kind of popping up in the genome and being expressed.
Wow. Wow. That's super cool. Well, we have from Mountain Vernon, Beth Campbell asks, we were interested to see that you love to camp and read about how you've been camping while researching animals. Do you think camping in the woods helps you better understand the animals that you're studying?
What a good question. I do like to be outdoors, and camping is part of that. And that's part of why I like being a wildlife biologist, is because it does get me outdoors into cool, interesting places. And that's where the animals live, right? So if you want to see the animals, you got to get out there at least a little bit. And of course, if you're camping, then you're out there all the time. And you do appreciate the world differently, especially when you think about a lot of the animals that I study are nocturnal. And so if you want to know what it's like to be an animal, you need to be out there when they're active. And so, I've spent a lot of time chasing kinkajous around in the rainforest, at night. And so being out there at night, whether you're you're following them around like I was with the radio antenna, or whether you're camping and just kind of being quiet and listening to the animals and listening to the noises and just thinking about, like, what would it be like to not have a flashlight and to have to survive in this environment, with, maybe better night vision than we have, but you start to appreciate the sense of sound that must be important to them and how important the sense of smell must be to them, all from kind of being out there and at different times of day, and especially, for these nocturnal animals at night.
And that's just one of my favorite things. It's like just observing, being quiet in the rainforest. Rihanna, and we have a question from Rihanna and one from Hallie or Haley Elementary. Nice name, school. Okay, where have you been on your travels, and how many species have you studied? And then on that is, what's the greatest distance you've traveled to see an animal?
Right. Well, the last one, I just earlier this year was in Indonesia for the first time, and that's my first time. I was in another part of Asia once, but mostly it's my first time in Southeast Asia, and so that's my longest trip. And we were there to work with orangutans, so that was really cool to see them, and working on a GPS anklet that we can put on their ankle to help track the orangutans. So that's the furthest. I have. I like to try to keep some research going locally and then also internationally. So in North Carolina, we have a lot of work going, and I'm getting out to see different parts of the state, and I love working right here in my own neighborhood. I have camera traps, and I'm studying those animals, and then further out in the state, we're working in the mountains and we're working on the coast, and then I have projects running sometimes at different parts of the world. So I've worked in Panama for a long time. With the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute has a research station down in Panama. And so that's where I did my kinkajou work in 1993. That's a long time ago, probably. And I've been going back, and I've been returning to that site since then. And then I've worked in other places in Central America, Costa Rica, Belize. I've worked in South America, in Venezuela, French Guiana, Ecuador. Yeah, that's it. And then I've worked in Africa and Kenya a number of times on projects with lions and baboons. And in Zambia, we got to go study the largest colony of bats, this giant colony of flying foxes that migrates down to Zambia. That was really cool.
Ooh. Animal Lover 2000 wants to know, what's your longest expedition and which is your favorite?
Well, so when I did my PhD, I was in Panama for a year and a half. And so that was kind of the longest time. We moved down there. My wife was there. We had an apartment. And so we were there. But we had an apartment, so we weren't camping for the whole time. Last year, I did an expedition to Kenya where we were camping, for a month. And so that was, no laundry, no showers, sort of really cold stream that you'd run down and try to clean yourself once a week. But I love that one because it's just such an amazing mountain, and you could hike up to different levels and see different types of vegetation, from the rainforest to the bamboo forest to the shrubs to the grass to up at the top. It's just rock and ice, and then there's different animals that
on Mount Kenya.
Yeah. So that was really great. Favorite. That's like picking your favorite kid, right? I don't know. I can't pick.
Favorite?
My least favorite was a trip to Peru where we were unable to get research permits because of political unrest. And so we went there and sat around, watched a lot of birds, but we couldn't do any of our work. So, I mean, it wasn't so bad because I got to see Peru. That was pretty cool, but we didn't get to do any of our research. So that was kind of a bummer.
Data, you want the data. That's the exciting part. We have two more. Let's see, one from Anastasia and Kate at Fair Hill Elementary. They're in 4th grade. Can your work be dangerous at times? And related, this one's from Nandon. Are there any dangers you have to face while doing your job?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, anytime you're out in the wild, there's the danger, a tree could fall on your head, or but so we always try to minimize, we always try to know about the risk and minimize the risk, and then prepare that if something does happen, you're ready to deal with it in an emergency situation and avoid, things getting worse. being out in nature, you worry about things like snake bites, insect bites. Elephants are probably the most dangerous thing I've ever faced. And you have to be really careful if you're working in an area with elephants. Usually if you're in your car, you're safe, but sometimes they flip cars. So you just need to kind of be aware of them. Africa's got big predators and big elephants, so they have to worry about that. I do tree climbing for some of my research. We shoot lines over trees and then use sort of rock climbing equipment to climb up into the tree. And so that's, potentially dangerous. I haven't had any issues, knock on wood here, because we're very careful. We try to be very professional about it and just do our work. And it's pretty cool to be up there in the trees, but it's a little scary sometimes. Even still after all these years, when you're up there and the wind starts blowing and the trees start swaying back and forth and you're just hanging from this little rope strung over a branch, you start to think about how far down it is. So it's a little scary. Dangers, what other dangers? I helped a friend with an anaconda project once. That was pretty cool. So we were catching anacondas, and they could potentially attack you and eat you, but we had a group of people, so if anyone ever did, we could sort of unwrap the snake so that it wouldn't actually get them.
That was your game plan.
Yeah.
If it does happen, just unwrap the snake.
Well, it happened once to another one of his field assistants, and my friend was at the other end of the marsh, and he had to run over to her, and the snake had it had bit her pant leg and ripped her pants, and she was kind of fighting with it, and they managed to get it off.
Oh, good. A snake fight. We've never talked about that on this show. That's great.
Yeah. So, the other one you have to, so elephants and then crocodiles are the other one. You want to be really careful. If there's an area that has crocodiles, don't go swimming. Just, even though you're hot, you're sweaty, it's not worth it.
I will make you that promise, just personally. We have Abdulaziz and Vishesh. They have two related questions. How do you catch a small and very fast animal? And what's the fastest animal you've ever caught?
So, yeah, catching animals is sometimes really hard because they don't want to be caught, and they're very shy, and usually they have a really good sense of smell. And so on the projects where I want to put a tracking tag, we have to catch the animal. That's one of the nice things about camera traps is you don't have to catch the animal. You put the camera out and you just get them walking by. And so they usually don't even realize the camera's there. But when we have to catch them, there's all sorts of different ways of doing it. And so that's where you really have to study the animal. You have to learn about their behavior, about their natural history, about their habits, about their food. And you have to try to figure out how to trap them best. And there's all kinds of different traps. There's like cage traps, there's little box traps, there's traps that might just catch an animal by the foot. And so there's all sorts of different ways, and you have to just figure out for this particular animal, how do you catch them? Agoutis are this big rodent that are, you know them, Haley, right? And they're fast. They can go super fast when they get scared. And so they're not like cheetah fast, right? They don't run like that long of a distance, but they are a big rodent that's out in the rainforest during the daytime, and just about every predator would love to eat them. So they're super, super nervous, and they can go from 0 to 60 like really fast. And we can see them all over the place, but they weren't going into our traps. And so what we did was we put a camera trap next to the trap to do a little surveillance, and we realized that they were watching us. They were hanging out in front of the trap, but they just wouldn't go in. And they were watching us check the trap, and that made them nervous about the trap. So we actually changed, after seeing that, we changed our routine, and we started only checking the trap at night when they weren't there, so they wouldn't see us going there, and then we were able to start catching them. So sometimes it's like you try to outwit these animals, and they outwit you back, and it's like a mind game, losing to a baboon or something in a mental game.
And sometimes you just can't get the one you're looking for. Sometimes they're just the smart ones who just will not be caught.
Yeah, so we're trying right now in Panama to catch peccaries and paca. Peccaries are like a big pig, and paca are a big rodent, kind of like the agouti. And we go to the fruit stand in Panama, and we buy every fruit we can find. Anything you can imagine, they sell at the fruit stands in Panama. And we put them down the forest floor in front of the camera trap to see which one will they eat. And they're not going for any of them, so we can't figure out what bait to use to catch these animals. So we're still getting skunked by the animals.
Well, good luck for that one. That'll be cool to figure out what actually works. Um, we have two questions. We're kind of transitioning. There are a lot of questions coming in about your past and how you got to where you are now. So we've got what did you take in college to become a wildlife biologist? This is from Michael and Haley.
Okay.
Yeah, and how long have you been a wildlife biologist?
Yeah, so so in high school, I really liked science, and I liked running around the woods, and those are sort of two separate things, right? And so I would go camping and I would go fishing and things like that. I grew up in Michigan, and I really loved physics class, and I really liked biology class, and I wanted to go into genetic engineering. That's what I thought I wanted to go into, and then. So I went to Cornell University, and I was a biology student for freshman year. And after that, I got a job over the summer working at a medical school in a lab, doing lab work. And this is what I thought I wanted to do. And I found I just really didn't like the lab work. It was like exhausting to me. At the end of the day, even though I'm just sitting down and working on a microscope and things all day long, it was like exhausting to me. And so when I went back to school the next year, I started looking at, well, what else can I do in science that's not just sitting at a microscope all day long? And that's where I started finding the more the ecology side of science. And that's when I realized, oh, actually, I could do the outdoor thing and the science thing and put them together. And I took a class that semester called mammalogy, study of mammals, and that just kind of, I think, set me down the path. And so I ended up with a degree in biology. And then went out and got a PhD in zoology.
Someday, I'm going to take your mammalogy course.
Yeah, I teach mammalogy now. It's true, at NC State.
Yeah, someday.
I'll sign up.
Well, we've got more questions from Prisha. Oh, was there anyone or anything that was an interest to you from your childhood that led you to be a wildlife biologist? If so, who or what?
Well, definitely. The outdoor part was part of it, right? So I was a Boy Scout and liked to go camping and liked to just run around the woods in my neighborhood and catch frogs and all that kind of, build forts. And so I think that led me to an interest in conservation, an interest in the outdoors, an interest in nature in general, not necessarily wildlife in specific. I actually was really into frogs at one point and really thought I was going to just study frogs, but in terms of people, there were some influential people, but I think I was sort of still on this genetic kick when I was a kid, right? And sort of the more engineering, physics, chemistry, and so I got lots of good opportunities to do that kind of stuff, but then I kind of switched tracks a little bit. And so in college, definitely my mammalogy professor, Dieter McLaren, was a big influence. And some other professors at Cornell who took me to Panama for the first time were a big influence. The other thing in high school and college, also I was an athlete, and so I was a wrestler in high school and college. And one of the things I liked about the field biology side of things was the sort of being like fit mattered, right? Like you want to be able to go hike 10, 20 miles. And so it's nice. There's not a lot of jobs where actually fitness is important, right? There's like professional athletes and police and, Army people, but it's cool that like field biology is something where you should, if you're fit, you'll do better at your job. And so it gives you a little bit more inspiration to stay fit so that you can do your job well. So I've also kind of that's something else from my childhood that has kind of carried over.
I love that. And it's good for your life in general. Yeah. Casey says, what job-related experience after college did you have that allowed you to get a job as a wildlife biologist? You talked a little bit about that. What advice do you have for someone who's trying to get into this field and already has the appropriate degree?
Right. So I got a couple of summer jobs working for professors or working for museums, definitely going to Panama with a class from Cornell would help me sort of see what that was like and see what that place was like. And then I got into a PhD program and did my PhD at the University of Tennessee. And after that, I did a postdoc in Chicago at the Field Museum. So a postdoc is just kind of like after you finish your PhD, but before you get a real job, you had this sort of temporary job thing. And that's called postdoc because it's after your doctoral. And so I did a postdoc at the Field Museum, and that was when I did the lion work in Kenya. And then I got a real job at the New York State Museum in Albany. And I was there for 11 years before I came down here to New York. So that was kind of my zigzaggedy path route. I know a lot of students after they do their undergrad, they go work field tech jobs, and I think that's a good way to do it. So to be a field technician, and there's a lot of these jobs. Often they're sort of short term. It'd be like a field season, which means like someone studying birds during their breeding season. They need help finding nests, and so they'll hire someone for 3 months to go tromp around the grasslands of Nebraska finding nests or something like that. And so you can work for those 3 months doing that, and then you look and somebody else might need help with a fish project in Arizona. And so you can sort of go down there, and that's a good way to, one, see the world, which is pretty cool, and see a lot of interesting places. And then also learn a lot of different techniques in terms of how to find nests, how to study fish, and learn some of those kinds of things. And then also start to learn from the different scientists that are running the project, whether it's a grad student or a professor or whatever, start to learn, like, what are the things that they're doing, right? If I'm out there finding the nest, what are they doing? And how did they set this up? What are the questions that they're asking? How did they get the funding for it? And sort of learn more of that side of thing as you go as well. And because that'll help you decide, if you want to if you want to get a job, you probably need to go to grad school, usually at least a master's degree. And so that'll kind of help you figure out, like, what is it that you want to go, what direction, what questions are you interested in, what systems are you interested in. And then, the other thing is a lot of first jobs, whether it's a technician job or another job, are pretty sort of low on the totem pole. And then you sort of will move up within that organization. A lot of times it's like, you have to, because a lot of times people will hire or promote people that they already know, right? So sometimes you have to volunteer, and then you get to know, then the boss gets to know the volunteers, and they're like, oh, that was really good. We should, hire her. Since some new money comes available, like, oh, we should hire her. She's really good. And then you can kind of move on from there. So it kind of makes, getting your foot in the door is kind of the tricky part, and then, show how good you are, and then it'll kind of go from there.
And it's kind of a bit of a small world too. I mean, in wildlife biology, you guys all kind of know each other. Like, I mean, we know a lot of the same people that we've met independently because of just kind of how small the community is.
It is, and so that also, whenever you're getting a job in any field, there's often references, right? If I'm going to hire someone and I don't know them, but Haley, you do, I might ask you, hey, what's this guy like? And you might be like, well, he slept in every day and was late getting up. I'm like, all right, good, thanks. I'm not going to hire him and look someplace else. Or you might say, oh, she was a great worker. She was really good. She was really, attended to details. I'm like, okay, great. I'm gonna go for it. So those references are really important, which is why it's always good to sort of show your best face. It's also a field that it is fairly competitive because it doesn't pay a lot, but it can be really rewarding and you can really make a difference. And so we do get a lot of passionate people who come into it. So it is, it can be hard to kind of break into it sometimes.
Well, New Richmond Elementary, we have a question from them asking, when you're not out in the field or teaching, what other aspects of your career do you enjoy?
I like communicating with people like you. I like sharing the science stories with the public, giving talks or doing things on TV or videos or these types of chats. And so that's like a way to get our message, to tell the story of the animals and what discoveries we've made to a broader audience, right? So as scientists, we write scientific papers and we publish those scientific papers, and there's other scientists that read those, but usually elementary school kids don't read scientific papers, right? And so there's these other ways that we can sort of get the message out and tell you about the olongito and the orangutans and the elk and all those types of things. So I really like that side of things as well.
And you're really good at it. I've seen a lot of things that you've done on camera, both documentary style things and things on Discovery Channel. You're on What on Earth
Yep.
sometimes?
Yeah.
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 And I mean, those are great. And I think it's really important that you're you're communicating, but also sharing that for scientists, you have to communicate. That's
Yeah.
great.
Well, it's a fun part of the job, and I mean, if I'm good at it, it's just because I just try to genuinely enjoy what I do and tell the stories of the animals that are, you know, sort of hidden secret out there in the cloud forests.
Yeah, well, it comes through, and also it helps that it's just really exciting stuff. I mean, it's animals. Adam at Fairhill Elementary School asks, have you used math as a wildlife biologist?
Oh, do I ever? Yeah, for sure. So when we get to the research, there's sort of a cycle of research, and it's often like figure out what the research question is, figure out how you're going to collect data, collect the data, but then you don't know your answer until you analyze the data. And analyzing the data involves a lot of numbers and until a lot of math. And so there's all sorts of different ways we do it, different types of statistics mostly, but it's lots of, you know, even just regular arithmetic, averaging, summing, you know, showing totals, making basic graphs just to explore the data. So a lot of times, you know, sometimes you find a new species in a museum drawer. That's like a eureka discovery moment, right? But a lot of times those discovery moments come when you make a graph. And you're like, I've been collecting this data for, you know, 3 years. I finally got it all summarized and organized, and now I'm going to make this graph. And what did I find? And sometimes it's cool, sometimes it's not. But a lot of times that eureka moment comes on a spreadsheet, you know, making a graph. And so that can be one of the really fun parts of it, actually, is sort of with the math.
That was the most fun I've ever heard anyone describe a graph in my life.
You also come over. We'll do some graphing some night, Haley. You'll see
Graphing. Okay, great. I do love graphs. Anyway, so Animal 99 wants to know, what are your hobbies when you're not working as a wildlife biologist? And Beth Campbell from Mount Vernon wants to know more about off-road unicycling.
Sure.
And she says, were you kidding about that? Or is that something you really do?
Yep.
How did you learn?
Well, so let's, other than unicycling, we'll get to unicycling in a second, but definitely the unicycling is one of my favorite hobbies. I mean, I like camping even when I'm not working. I like to go camping with my family. I like to go bird watching a lot, which is, again, it's kind of wildlife stuff, but just for fun, just to see birds, explore areas. And what else do I like to do? You know, I've been trying to learn the guitar, but it's not working very well. I wish I knew how to play the guitar.
I'll trade you a little graphing for some guitar lessons.
All right, you're on.
There you go.
I like to play ultimate frisbee is another hobby. But so the unicycling is something that I picked up. It's been about 10 years now, and a friend of mine was like, he was unicycling. He had just started, and he wanted to talk somebody else into it so that he'd have someone to ride with. And so he told me, and he's like, oh, it's really fun and it's great exercise. And I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll just try it and see if I kind of wanted to see if I could learn it. And I learned it pretty quick, and he was right. It was really fun, and it was really good exercise. And once I started riding around the streets, that got to be really easy pretty quickly. And so to have a challenge, plus I just like being in the woods anyway. So I started riding off-road. I started riding on mountain bike trails, and that turned out to be so much fun. And the unicycle is really easy to travel with. So sometimes when I'm traveling to different places, I'll throw it in a bag and take it on the airplane and put it on a bus and take it to some cool place and ride around trails and explore the woods or the mountains on a unicycle. And it's tons of fun. It is really good exercise. You get great reactions out of people. It's, you know, started all kinds of great conversations. It makes, you know, everyone smiles when you ride by and looks at you. So it's been fun. And now my two sons ride unicycles as well. So we go tooling around, the three of us on unicycles down the trail. Sometimes we turn a lot of heads.
That's awesome. All right. So we have one last question, time for one last question. We read your advice that you said, you don't have to do what you love to do. You don't have to do what you love what you do. Does that mean that you didn't love science at first, but started to? Do Do you think that people can love any job? How do you prepare for a job that might not match your favorite things, but could become something that you love?
Well, I think, I mean, I do love what I do, but you know, I love other things too, right? So I'm not a professional ultimate player or a professional unicyclist. So I think, you know, it's, some people think that you know, that they should follow their passion, and if they have one passion that's their most favorite passion, that they should follow that, right? But if your most favorite passion is, let's just say, to be a rock and roll star, but you might not be able to be a rock and roll star, right? And so you can keep that passion and have it as a hobby, and then find some other thing that you still enjoy doing and do that as a profession. And I have friends that are great outdoorsmen and go outdoors, you know, all the time, and they have another job that they do that doesn't have anything to do with outdoors, but it you know, it allows them to make a living, and they like what they do. They, you know, they're interested in the technology that they're doing, or the product that they're selling, or different things like that. And they're, you know, there's all sorts of things that you can enjoy about working in teams together in different occupations. So I just think the question was, you know, part of the question I think was something like, do you have to like every job that you?
How do you prepare for a job that might match your favorite things, or that could become something that you love?
Right. So I think
people can love any job.
I don't think people can love any job. That was the question. Yeah. No, I think there are some jobs that are not going to be right for the right person, right? And so you know, at some point you should recognize that, you know, and that's kind of what I did with the lab job when I was after my freshman year in college. I had the job in the lab, and at the end of that, you know, I saw it through the summer, and that's why these temporary jobs are good, right? I realized, okay, this is something I don't want to do. Now let's go try something else. And so, you know, that was something where I thought that that's what I was going to love, and I was just it was wrong, and I found out. So, you know, luckily I was able to find some other things.
Okay, well, I am super thrilled because I misread a card across the room that said one more question.
Oh, yeah.
We have time.
I thought so. I was just checking. I was like, oh, all right, we're ending early.
That was my bad. We have tons of questions too coming in, so I'm glad we can keep going. Okay, I'm going to go as fast as I can. All right, from Sophia Flores, what plans do you have for the future? And Fox Mill Elementary, a question. So what plans do you have for the future? Do you want to do this for the rest of your life, and why?
I think I do. You know, sometimes in this field, you can get sort of promoted to, you know, be the director of the department or the director of the museum or something like that. And I think, why would I want to do that? Then I wouldn't get to go chase orangutans around anymore in the forest. So I don't, you know, I like doing the science. I like doing the conservation. I like writing the papers. I like talking to school kids. So I like, you know, I'd like to keep doing all of those things. So we are doing a lot of camera trapping now in terms of what's for the future. We're trying to get in North Carolina volunteer citizen scientists running cameras in all 100 counties. And this is a huge effort. It'll be the biggest camera trap study ever if we can pull it off. So right now, we're actually, my team is driving camera traps to libraries in North Carolina. So you'll be able to go to a library and check out a camera trap, and then go set it in your backyard or your local state park. And so we're trying to really learn about the animals all across the state, but we really need help from you know, people in North Carolina to do this. So this is a big project that we're working right now, right in the state. I also have a project in Panama that I'll be going back to later this year. And we are tracking different animals with GPS collars and to see how they move around and how they all eat the same species of fruit. And we have a map of where all these fruiting trees are because we fly a drone and we map the fruiting trees with the drone. And so we're able to compare how these different animals move around, and we're trying to use it basically as an intelligence test, that they all have the same spatial puzzle. How do I get to all these different trees? And we can compare how they do it to see if monkeys have bigger brains, right? So we're doing capuchin monkeys, spider monkeys, and comparing them with kinkajous, who I think is going to win because they're my favorite, and coatis, and then we're trying to get the paca and the peccary and maybe even tapir to see how they all sort of comparatively move around this area. So there's those two ones. We're trying to raise some money for writing some grants to try to do some orangutan work. Although we still haven't figured out how to get the GPS ankle tracker to survive.
With orangutans?
They shoot them all up, the ones we first tested.
Oh, wow.
Because they can just grab their foot and just put it right into their mouth. And so they destroyed 2 models so far. So we're going back to the drawing board and trying to make some changes and see if we can get that one to work.
Try just asking nicely?
What's that?
Did you try just asking nicely?
We can distract them with a banana for a little bit, but eventually they finish the banana and then they go back to their ankle tracker. So
there it is.
And I have a project in Peru where we're looking at wildlife a disease that moves between humans and wildlife. So we're trying to study how humans get that, and have a grant in review that if we get it, we'll be climbing trees in Madagascar and putting camera traps up there to look at the lemurs.
Right on.
I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, I'll come. Okay, Titan123 says, what type of tools are on your wall behind you? And have you ever used them in the field?
Yeah, so I like to collect weapons or machetes or things like that in all the different countries whenever I travel somewhere, especially machetes, because usually I'm often out there chopping away with a machete as I go. And so I like to buy a local machete and then bring it back. I've got a bunch of machetes at home. So these are, like this is a machete I just got from Indonesia. So it's still pretty shiny because I haven't used this one yet. And then this is actually a gardening tool from Zambia that they use to dig up potatoes. So they just kind of use it like this to dig up potatoes. And I saw it sitting in a market on the side of the street. I was like, that looks cool. I want to put that, bring that home. So I haven't used this one. I've never dug up any potatoes or stabbed anyone with it, but it's kind of scary. And then I've got a couple bow and arrows up there. One from Panama, one from Kenya, and a couple axes and other gardening tools. So yeah, they're just kind of fun. I guess that's maybe kind of a hobby. I like to collect machetes and gardening tools.
I totally get it. I really do. We have a question from Tejesh and another one from Gavin's Kids. What benefits do your footage from the cameras bring to society and the environment?
Yeah, so great question. So the camera traps go out and they sit there and animals walk by and we get little clips of them as they're moving by. And there's kind of 2 different things that we can do with these pictures. First of all, they're often beautiful and fun and they get people's attention, and just the pictures can be important for telling the stories of an animal and telling the research story, right? So just having these pictures as a beautiful, and yeah, you've got my book there. Thank you very much. So
you could even make a book.
Yeah, so this is
right there.
Yeah. So I wrote that book. This came out last year, and it's full of beautiful camera trap pictures and trying to use the pictures to tell the research stories of what do the scientists discover and what pictures were the basis for that discovery. So that's the kind of beautiful picture side of things, that you can grab people's attention, get people excited about the animals. And then on the other side, there's the data, right? So we turn these pictures into numbers, basically, into zeros and ones that record which species lived where, what time of day, and all that kind of stuff. And so those are what we use to analyze and ask research questions. And some of the examples of things that we found recently was that hunting in North America doesn't have a big impact on wildlife populations. And hiking also doesn't have that big of an effect. Things like habitat are much more important. So you don't have to worry that if you're hiking, you're going to disturb the animals in a big way. It's not that big of a deal. We also found that some people are worried that feral cats are overrunning the place and are a real problem for like bird populations. And we found our cameras got very, very few cats in most of these nature preserves, but lots of coyote pictures. So it seems that the coyotes are keeping the cats out of these nature areas, which is a good thing, to not have too many cats running around. So those are just a couple examples of some recent papers that we've done, but basically by taking these cameras and looking at all these different places and which animals you record where, you can start to turn them into numbers, do some math, ask some research questions, and start to discover things about how animals and humans can survive on the planet better.
Gavin's kids want to know, in your opinion, what are the two most powerful threats to the animal world currently, and what can we do to help?
Yeah. So globally, it is hunting and overharvest and poaching. Places, especially in Asia and some parts in Africa, things like the elephant tusks and the rhino horns and the pangolins and all these, yeah, some of it's really, really bad. And that's, we're maybe starting to see a little bit of a corner turn where like China is starting to outlaw ivory. And we really need more of that, because that is globally a really big deal, and it's a really big problem. And so anything, I think advocating for an ivory ban, and for certainly a rhino horn ban, and supporting, most of that work is not happening in the States. The States is not a huge ivory market. Certainly we should have zero ivory market in the United States. So you should support that, and then just supporting organizations that are fighting for elephants and rhinos and pangolins and things like that. There's a great group called Save Vietnam's Wildlife that does a lot of pangolin rescue in Vietnam, which is like ground zero for these animals. So I always send them a little bit of money, because I think they're doing a great job. But there's lots of bigger organizations too out there. So you asked for two. Certainly in the United States, there's a lot of hunting, but it's all very regulated, and it's not bad for conservation. It's actually the money that gets generated through hunting is used to buy and protect land, which is good for all animals. And the hunting is done in a way where they manage it and they make sure that they're not over hunting anything. That didn't used to be the case, right? You think about things like the passenger pigeons, and we talked about fishers earlier, that in our country were over harvested 100 years ago, and the case of the passenger pigeons did go to extinct. But now we control that, and so that's much better. I think in our country, the challenges are especially around land preservation, and we have suburban development. We have this urban development, and we really need to keep protecting these areas of green space and open space and natural habitat that the animals can have as refuges. And we need to also make sure they're connected, because animals need to move between them. They can't just be isolated, because if they're isolated, they won't be able to interbreed, and so they'll lose their genetic diversity. And the other problem is, certainly the planet is warming, and so habitats are shifting, and so these animals need to be able to move. The new good habitat might be north of them, and so they need to be able to get there. And so that's having a connectivity of these habitats. If there's a giant highway and a huge city in between the two, then they're not gonna be able to make it.
There needs to be some kind of animal highway between the green spaces.
Well, or some culverts underneath, or bridges, animal overpasses over the top are another solution. So to answer that question in summary, globally, it's the illegal animal trade and poaching and the black market there. And in North America, I think it's habitat protection and connectivity.
We have time for one more question.
For real this time?
For real this time. From New Richmond Elementary. The sixth graders there also, they want to give a shout out thanks from all of them to Roland Kays for taking the time to share with us, and to Jason Learning for connecting us together. Hey, shout out to you, New Richmond Elementary. You are inspiring the problem solvers of the very next generation. So thank you for making that.
Great. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And thanks for all the awesome questions. These are super fun.
All right. Well, I think that's the last question we have time for today. And thank you so much for coming.
It was great to hang out. And thanks everybody else for sending the questions. It was great to hear. There were some really good ones in there. Some of them I was expecting, but some of them I was totally surprised by, and pleasantly surprised. They were great.
All right. Well, we will see you soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Have a great time tracking animals.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
And since we are all out of time, we're just so excited that we got to talk to Roland. And our next event will be on February 23rd, featuring STEM role model Erin Fischel. We'll get to ask Erin all about what she does as a robotics and acoustic researcher. Until then, from Jason Learning, I'm Haley Nelson. We'll see you next time on Jason Live.